He lifted the diamond collar in front of the entire ballroom and smiled as if humiliation were a gift. "Maybe no," Chike Okoye said, holding the black velvet box toward his wife. "You'll finally look like you belong among people like us." A few guests laughed because they thought they were supposed to. Others lowered their eyes into their glasses. The chandeliers above the Royal Baobab Grand Hotel glowed over polished marble, gold-rimmed tables, society donors, bankers, board members, and men who wore power like a family inheritance. It was Amara Okoye's birthday, but nothing in the room belonged to celebration anymore. Beside Chike stood Zara Bello, the woman everyone had been calling a family consultant for the last 30 minutes, and the same woman whose hand had rested on his arm too naturally all evening. She wore emerald silk, sharp confidence, and the smile of someone who believed the throne had already changed owners. Near the champagne tower, Chief Emeka Okoye, Chike's father, clapped once and laughed under his breath. "That," he said loudly, "is a proper gift. Maybe now she'll finally understand what real quality looks like." Amara lowered her eyes to the necklace. To most people in the ballroom, it looked expensive. To a collector, it looked bold. To a mistress, it looked like victory. To the woman holding it, it looked wrong. The clasp was not the current design used by Mirembe Atelier. The setting held the center stone too shallow. The weight was lighter than it should have been, and the certificate tucked beneath the velvet used an authentication format that Mirembe had retired years ago under sealed internal policy. No one in that room understood what Amara knew in one touch. The necklace was fake, and the men humiliating her with it had spent years worshipping the company that made the real ones. What Chike did not know was that the quiet wife he had brought to the edge of disgrace was the billionaire majority owner and hidden chief executive of Mirembe Atelier, the luxury jewelry house his father had spent years begging to enter. He did not know the woman he had called too simple for his future had been quietly holding the financial floor beneath his family's feet. He did not know her attorney was already in the room. He did not know Mirembe's senior forensic appraiser was seated beside the charity auction table. He did not know the fake certificate under that necklace might connect to forged documents already under internal review, documents tied to his father's company. And he certainly did not know that his final public laugh was seconds away from becoming the sound that cracked his whole life open. If you love stories where betrayal meets consequence and quiet women stop being mistaken for weak ones, subscribe now and comment "Crown." Because what Chike wanted to turn into Amara's most humiliating night was about to become the first night the truth stopped hiding for him. The red verification light flashed above the authentication table inside Mirembe Atelier's private restoration wing just after noon, and everyone in the room went still. It was not a loud room. Nothing inside Mirembe was loud. Real wealth rarely needed the performance poor ambition loved. The long glass cases held archive necklaces, royal commissions, private stones awaiting certification, and legacy pieces older than several countries' stock exchanges. One wrong code inside that room could move more money than most families saw in generations. Amara entered without hurry, wearing a cream coat, low heels, and the small gold pendant her mother had made by hand when money was still something counted one note at a time. To the world outside, she was Amara Okoye, a soft-spoken wife who worked in luxury administration and wore simple dresses to family dinners. Inside Mirembe Atelier, she was Amara Mirembe, the owner, the architect of the company's global expansion, and the final signature on transactions large enough to swallow entire firms whole. The room lowered itself around her. Nneka Dlamini, her senior assistant and the one employee who could read Amara's silence better than most people understood shouting, stepped forward with a tablet pressed against her chest. "Madam," she said carefully, "the archives team found another certificate mismatch." Amara's gaze moved to the sealed tray under glass. "Show me." Nneka turned the screen toward her. This serial line belongs to a sapphire cuff restored 7 years ago, but a lender verification request this morning lists it as a diamond collar. The request didn't come from a client, it came through a commercial financing desk. That mattered. A client error could mean embarrassment. A lender verification could mean collateral fraud. Amara rested one hand lightly on the table. Seal external access. Send copies to legal, risk, and authentication control. No one wasted time asking why. Her power had never come from volume. She did not need to perform authority. She carried the kind that made other people stand straighter without knowing they had done it. At the far end of the room, Tade Akinyemi, Mirembe's legal director and the only person outside her inner circle who had seen how much she was willing to protect people who did not deserve it, waited with a leather folder in hand. "The Nairobi acquisition papers are ready," he said. "We only need your signature." Amara took the pen, but before she signed, her eyes moved to the wall. Behind museum glass hung an old charcoal sketch on cream paper. The lines were rough in places, elegant in others. At the bottom, in faded ink, was a name: Eleni Mirembe, her mother. The woman who had sold handcrafted pieces from a rented market stall before illness took her too early, and poverty tried to bury her work with her. Eleni had taught Amara to feel truth before she trusted shine, to weigh metal in her palm, to listen to silence in people, to understand that anything desperate to prove value usually had none. Amara touched the glass softly. In her mind, she heard her mother's voice again. Real value does not beg to be believed. Let your work speak first. Then let your name arrive only if it must. That lesson had shaped everything. It was why Mirembe Atelier had been built through private holding structures and sealed trusts. Why the world knew the brand before it knew the woman behind it. Why ministers, actresses, collectors, and billionaires fought for invitation-only access, while the tabloids had almost no photographs of the company's true owner. And it was why Chief Emeka Okoye had spent years talking about Mirembe Atelier as if it were a kingdom he deserved to enter, without ever realizing his son's quiet wife owned it. Nneka cleared her throat gently. Chief Okoye's office called again this morning. He's still requesting a private meeting with Mirembe's executive board. A faint, sad smile touched Amara's mouth. Chief Emeka Okoye loved proximity to power. He spoke of legacy at charity dinners. He spoke of family stature at bank lunches. He spoke of Mirembe Atelier the way insecure men often spoke of rare things, as symbols they wanted to wear, not values they wanted to live by. "Tell his office," Amara said, "that the request remains under review." Tade opened the second file. There's also the trade extension for the supplier linked to Okoye Infrastructure Group. If you approve it, they avoid default for 1 more quarter. Amara lowered her eyes to the document. Months earlier, Chike had mentioned at dinner that his father's company was under temporary pressure. He had said it the way privileged men often explained things to women they believed could never understand the scale. Carelessly, with a little pity, and without the fear they would have shown another man. Amara had not corrected him. Instead, through one of Mirembe's subsidiary commercial channels, she had quietly authorized structured trade support to an intermediary supplier connected to Emeka's network. Nothing illegal, nothing personal. Collateralized, reviewed, documented, but enough breathing room to keep the old man's company from collapsing before its next cycle. No one in the Okoye family knew. Not Chike, not Emeka, not even the bankers who bragged with him over whiskey knew the lifeline had come from the daughter-in-law they treated like decorative furniture at family dinners. Tade watched her. "You are very generous to people who do not know they are being protected." Amara signed. "I'm not doing it for him," she said quietly. "I'm doing it because Chike still believes his father can be saved." The moment she said her husband's name, memory moved through her like weather. 3 years earlier, at a charity auction held during a rainy Lagos evening. Amara had quietly bid on one of her mother's early designs after a private collector put it up for sale. The room had been crowded, loud, arrogant. She had stepped outside for air after the winning bid, holding the wrapped piece too close to her chest. Rain had hammered the pavement. Then a stranger appeared beside her with an umbrella. Chike. His smile had been warm then, not sharp. Curious, not calculating. He had looked at her face, not at her clothes, not at the donor tables, not at the names being whispered across the room, and said, "You look like someone who carries too much alone." Back then, that had felt like being seen. Later that same night, when someone mentioned Mirembe Atelier, Chike had not shown interest in the craftsmanship. His attention had drifted instead toward the men discussing private clubs, imported whiskey, and inheritance. Amara noticed. But she had told herself everybody carried some wound that made them hunger in foolish directions. When he said he admired women who were peaceful, grounded, and not obsessed with status, she believed him. Maybe that had been her first real mistake. Another memory came colder. Chief Emeka at dinner, swirling red wine and laughing about Mirembe Atelier, as though the brand itself validated his bloodline. "A house like that," he had said, "belongs around real power." Then he had looked toward Amara's simple pendant and smiled the way rich men smile before they humiliate softly enough to pretend it is humor. "No offense, Amara, but some worlds are beyond sentimental little pieces." Chike had smiled weakly and said nothing. Amara had pressed her thumb against her mother's pendant under the table and stayed silent too, not because she had no answer, but because she already held one too large for that room. Back in the restoration wing, her phone buzzed. A message from Chike. "Busy tonight. Don't wait up." Amara stared at the screen a second longer than she wanted to. The next day was her birthday. Chike had insisted on hosting a high-profile charity dinner at the Royal Baobab Grand. He had called it special, proper, different from the quiet birthdays she usually preferred. Against her better judgment, she had allowed herself a small hope that maybe he was trying to repair whatever distance had grown between them. Then Nneka placed another document on the table. "The household manager flagged this," she said gently. "It was charged through the shared event account under Mr. Okoye's authorization." Amara picked it up. A receipt from a dealer she did not know. Obsidian Crown Antiques. The item description was short, careless, and instantly wrong to her trained eye. Mirembe-style diamond collar, estate certificate included. Not Mirembe. Mirembe-style. Her fingers tightened. Tade saw her face change. "Do you want me to open an immediate review?" "Not yet," she said. She turned the receipt over once, slowly. There was always a difference between suspicion and proof. Between a woman feeling foolish and a woman knowing she was being prepared for something worse. Her phone buzzed again. "Tomorrow will be unforgettable." The message should have sounded romantic. It did not. It sounded arranged. Amara placed the phone face down on the table and looked back at the flashing verification light, the lender mismatch, the supplier file, the fake-style receipt. One thread might be bad luck. 2 might be a pattern. 3 were a warning. "Tade," she said, her voice calm again. "Open a discreet review on the dealer. No contact with Chike. No warning to Chief Okoye. Keep Nneka copied." He nodded at once. "Understood." She signed one more document that quietly kept Emeka's supplier network from falling apart. Maybe after tomorrow, she thought, we will finally see what kind of life I have been trying to save. But across the city, Chike Okoye was not busy with work. The footage froze with his hand resting at the back of another woman's waist. For a moment, Amara heard nothing. Not the hum of the office lights, not the traffic below. Not the rain beginning against the windows of her private suite above Mirembe's eastern wing. The image on the screen seemed to push every other sound out of the room. Chike was stepping into a private elevator at the Royal Baobab. With Zara Bello. He wasn't hiding from a camera he didn't know was there. He wasn't walking at distance. He wasn't behaving like a man in a misunderstanding. He was relaxed, familiar, practiced. Neka stood beside the desk, pale and silent. Amara did not cry. Not yet. She simply stared as though her heart needed a few seconds to catch up to what her eyes had already accepted. Zara Bello was 31, polished, beautiful, ambitious, and dangerously good at seeming harmless. Amara had met her twice at charity events. Zara had smiled warmly, touched her wrist lightly, and called her sweet. Now that smile on the footage looked different. Not warm, victorious. The investigator's report, sitting open beside the screen, made it worse. There was no private bedroom recording, nothing illegal in the method. Public corridors, lounge entrances, elevator access points. Enough to preserve facts cleanly. Enough to destroy illusion without contaminating evidence. In the second clip, Zara kissed Chike's cheek near the hotel's upper lounge. He smiled. Then he guided her toward the restricted suites. Neka swallowed. "Madam, I'm sorry." Amara kept looking at the screen. "Play the next one." The footage changed. Champagne glasses, soft lighting, Zara laughing, Chike leaning closer than any husband with a conscience would lean. And then Amara's stomach turned. White orchids in Zara's hair. That morning, a florist had called Mirembe's events office by mistake, confirming a premium orchid delivery billed through Chike's card and linked to the same hotel event block reserved for her birthday charity dinner. Amara had told herself it might be part of a surprise. Now she understood it had been part of the staging. The investigator's notes included an overheard line from the public lounge, fragmentary but enough. "Zara, after tomorrow night, she'll finally understand she was never your level. Chike, she'll sign the separation once everyone sees it's already over." That hit harder than the image itself. Not because he wanted to leave. A marriage could fail. Love could weaken. People could become strangers. But this was not quiet failure. This was design. This was choosing her birthday, a ballroom, donors, witnesses, whispers, and a false gift to make humiliation look elegant. He was not only leaving her, he was preparing to make her feel small in front of everyone. Amara picked up her phone and called Tade Akinyemi. He answered on the second ring. "Amara." "Chike is having an affair," she said, her voice almost unnaturally even. "And tomorrow night he plans to announce separation at my birthday dinner." No gasp came from the other end, only silence. Then the soft sound of a pen being set down. "I warned you his behavior was changing," Tade said. "And I warned you the Okoye financial filings smelled wrong." She closed her eyes. "Tell me what to do. First, do not confront him tonight. Second, preserve everything. The investigator's report, hotel records, florist error, dealer receipt, messages he sent voluntarily, event lists, vendor logs. Do not touch private accounts. Do not access locked devices. We do this cleanly." Amara looked at the receipt again. The dealer used the words Mirembe style, estate certificate included. "Send it to authentication," Tade said at once. "And if he presents that necklace publicly as a Mirembe piece, we need someone in the room who can assess it without making it look staged." Within minutes, Kofi Mensah, Mirembe Atelier's senior forensic gem appraiser, and one of the few living experts who could recognize false legacy certification patterns from memory alone, called back. "Madam Mirembe," he said carefully, "Obsidian Crown has appeared in counterfeit-adjacent reviews before. They hide behind estate language and private resale phrasing. I cannot confirm without seeing the necklace. But the wording on this receipt is a warning. Can you attend tomorrow night's event? Yes, Kofi said. The charity auction already includes donated heritage pieces that require on-site valuation. I can be there in a professional capacity. He paused. There is one more issue. Amara waited. The phrase estate certificate included is abnormal. If the seller copied a retired Mirembe format, it may connect to the verification irregularities flagged this morning. Her throat tightened. The fake necklace might not only be cruelty, it might be evidence. After the call, the room became quiet again, but not empty. Memory came back in softer shapes, which almost made it worse. A winter 2 years earlier, when Chike had fallen ill and Amara had canceled a major board flight to stay with him. She had sat at his bedside, changing cold cloths, holding water to his lips, staying awake through fever because he seemed frightened by his own weakness. At dawn, he had squeezed her hand and whispered, "You're the only person who loves me without needing anything from me." That memory hurt now because it had once been true. Or at least she had believed it was. Maybe that was the cruelest part of betrayal. It never destroyed only the present. It went backward and touched the good memories, too. Tade called again minutes later. One more question. Does Chike still not know you own Mirembe? He knows I work there. That is not what I asked. Amara looked at her reflection in the glass. No. He never cared enough to know the difference between a job title and ownership. Then be careful tomorrow, Tade said. Men like him don't fear quiet women until they realize the quiet was mercy. Neka stood by the door. Do you want to cancel the dinner? Amara's face did not change. No, she said softly. If he wants witnesses, let him have witnesses. The whole ballroom felt the shift before anyone spoke. The music still floated through the room. Waiters still crossed the floor with silver trays. Candles still trembled in crystal holders. But when Chike entered with Zara beside him, not behind him, beside him, a colder current moved ahead of them, and every instinct in Amara's body knew the night had already crossed a line no marriage came back from. Zara smiled first. That was what cut deepest. No shame, no hesitation. She wore a deep green dress that caught every eye, the kind of dress chosen by a woman who expected to be remembered in photographs. Chike did not kiss his wife. He came close enough for the room to register him, then stopped at the distance men leave when tenderness has already been replaced by performance. "Happy birthday," he said, as if greeting a client. Amara kept a small smile in place. "Thank you." Across the ballroom, Tade watched from near the auction display. Kofi sat a few seats away with the valuation catalog open in front of him. Neither man looked at her too long. Neither wanted to alert Chike before the room itself became the witness. The ballroom had been decorated like a dream, fashioned by people who build fantasy by the hour. White florals climbed the mirrored columns. A gold-trimmed cake stood beneath suspended candlelight. The city glowed through the high windows. 2 weeks earlier, Amara had selected that cake herself, back when hope still embarrassed her but had not died. Chief Emeka was already half drunk on self-importance. He stood with donors and business associates, talking louder than everyone else, laughing harder than the jokes deserved. "My son understands how to host," he announced. "This is the kind of room where real families belong." Then his gaze drifted to Amara. "She's sweet, of course. Quiet, simple. Not exactly built for society, but sweet." A light laughter moved through the nearest circle. Amara touched her pendant. Her mother's gold lay warm against her skin. Real value does not beg to be believed. It was not the first time Emeka had said Mirembe Atelier's name that night. He had repeated it to bankers, donors, and old money wives, as though proximity to the brand itself elevated his bloodline. "Mirembe understands legacy," he said, lifting his glass.
That house knows power. One day our family will be doing serious business with them.
Amara lowered her eyes so no one would see the wound under the calm. He had spent years trying to reach the owner of Mirembe Atelier while insulting her over dinner. Zara moved through the ballroom at Chike's side, introduced as an investment consultant. Clean lie, dirty truth.
She laughed too softly, touched his sleeve too often, and carried herself like a woman waiting for recognition, not hiding from it. Then Amara saw the bracelet. It flashed under the chandelier when Zara lifted her glass. The design was not public. It echoed too closely a protected archive sketch Amara had approved for internal development 6 months earlier. Not identical, but close enough to turn discomfort into warning. Had Chike promised Zara access to a world he thought belonged to someone else? Or had the counterfeit chain reached deeper than a single necklace? A spoon touched crystal. Chike stood near the center of the room with a smile already half arranged. "Everyone," he said, "may I have your attention?" The room turned. Amara felt Tade's gaze on her but did not look his way. Her face remained calm. Her hands rested lightly together in front of her. Stillness had always unsettled the wrong kind of people, because they could not tell if it came from fear or control. Chike reached into his jacket and took out the black velvet box. Zara's mouth curved. Amara saw it. He held the box out before the whole room. "I wanted to give my wife something that finally makes her look like she belongs in a room like this." The silence after that line was vicious. A few people laughed because cowardice often hides inside social reflex. Amara accepted the box. Inside lay the collar, gold, bright, theatrical, expensive-looking to the untrained eye, vulgar in all the small ways that mattered. Chief Emeka clapped once. "Now that is a real gift." Amara lifted the necklace gently. Yes, wrong clasp, wrong weight, wrong stone behavior, wrong certificate language, wrong serial family. Chike had just gifted the owner of Mirembe Atelier a counterfeit Mirembe piece and used it as a weapon in front of a room full of people. She closed the box softly. "Thank you, Chike." Her calm emboldened him. He lifted his glass again and smiled with the confidence of a man who thought the scene had gone exactly as planned. "Since we are all here," he said, "I think it is time to stop pretending. Amara and I have grown apart. Tonight, I'm asking for separation." The ballroom froze. Someone gasped. Someone else turned their face away. Chief Emeka did not look shocked. He looked satisfied. Zara smiled into her champagne glass like victory had finally arrived dressed in silk and witnesses. Chike continued, performing dignity. "I need a partner who understands ambition, status, and the future my family is building." His eyes moved to Zara for barely half a second. That was enough. The whole room understood. Amara stood alone beneath gold light on her birthday, holding the fake gift her husband had used to dress up cruelty. His mistress stood nearby. His father watched with approval. Guests stared, some pitying, some enjoying, some already planning who they would call after they left. Everyone in that room believed they had just watched a quiet woman become small. Amara did not slap him, did not shout, did not plead. She let him believe his version of her for a few seconds longer. Then she raised her eyes and asked quietly, "Before I answer, may I have the necklace appraised?" Chike laughed. Chief Emeka waved a dismissive hand. "Let the poor girl enjoy her little piece." Zara leaned close enough for only Amara to hear. "Some women need proof before they accept they've been replaced." Amara turned and looked at her fully then. Not angry, not broken, just still enough to make Zara's smile flicker. A chair moved near the auction table. Kofi Mensah stood. "If Mrs. Okoye permits," he said, buttoning his jacket. "I can conduct a preliminary authentication on site. I'm already here as valuation consultant for the charity pieces." For the first time that evening, Zara's confidence dipped. Chike, proud and blind, gestured carelessly. "Please, go ahead." Amara placed the necklace back into the velvet case and slid it across the table. The lid closed with a soft click. In her chest, it sounded like a lock turning. Kofi's first response after opening the box was silence. That silence spread through the ballroom faster than accusation could have. Waiters stopped moving. The band lowered their instruments. Even the clink of glass disappeared. Kofi drew white gloves from his pocket and put them on slowly, the way surgeons do before they cut into a truth everyone wishes were still skin. Chike laughed under his breath. "Are we appraising a necklace or saving a life?" A few guests forced weak smiles. Kofi did not look up. He placed the collar on black velvet, examined the clasp under a pin light, checked the hinge, measured the setting, studied the stone, then turned the inner curve where a Mirembe maker's mark should have lived. Finally, he lifted the certificate, rubbed the paper, inspected the seal, and entered the serial into Mirembe's secure authentication system. The tablet chimed. His expression hardened. Chief Emeka took one step forward. "Is there a problem?" Kofi finally raised his eyes. "My preliminary finding," he said, his voice calm enough to feel merciless, "is that this piece is not an authentic Mirembe Atelier creation." The room shattered into silence. Chike blinked. "What?" Kofi laid the necklace down. "This collar was not produced by Mirembe Atelier." Chief Emeka's face darkened instantly. "Impossible. My son bought it from a private dealer." "Then your son received false information," Kofi replied. "Or the dealer knew precisely what was being sold." A murmur moved through the room. Chike raised one hand, trying to reclaim control. "Private dealers can be dishonest. That doesn't mean anything." Amara looked at him. "Who introduced you to the dealer?" For the first time all evening, he had no quick answer. Kofi continued. "The serial on this certificate is real, but it belongs to a heritage sapphire cuff restored years ago, not this necklace. The seal is forged. The paper stock is incorrect. The listed stone type does not match visible optical behavior. The clasp is not current Mirembe engineering. The proportions imitate a past design language, but fail in construction." Then he said the word that burned Chike's face in front of the whole room. "This is a copy." Minutes earlier, he had told her the necklace would make her look worthy of the room. Now everyone knew he had handed his wife a fake luxury collar on her birthday before announcing separation beside his mistress. Chief Emeka straightened, forcing contempt back into his posture. "And who exactly are you to speak for Mirembe Atelier?" Kofi met his eyes. "Kofi Mensah, senior forensic appraiser for Mirembe Atelier." The effect was immediate. Men who had laughed with Emeka went quiet. Women looked from the necklace to Zara's wrist to Amara's face. Mirembe Atelier was not some decorative brand. It was the luxury house Chief Emeka had spent the entire evening praising as if he belonged near it. And now one of its own experts had called his son's gift counterfeit. Kofi's gaze shifted toward Zara's bracelet. "Miss Bello," he said politely, "the bracelet you are wearing appears to echo a protected archive line. May I examine that as well?" "No," Zara said too quickly. The single word changed the room again. Not because refusal proved guilt on its own, but because innocent people do not sound afraid of light. Tade, still near the auction table, lowered his eyes to his phone and began recording names, statements, reactions, time markers, turning Chike's performance into preserved evidence, exactly as planned. Then Kofi picked up the certificate again. This time he studied it longer. Amara watched his face change, not into surprise, but recognition. He looked at the seal, then the authentication code, then the serial layout. When he finally spoke again, his voice had lowered. "Mrs. Okoye," he said, "this certification pattern appears to match a retired format connected to other irregular verification requests already under internal review."
Chief Emeka went still. Chike stopped looking angry and started looking uncertain. Kofi chose each word carefully. "I cannot make a final legal conclusion in a ballroom. But this does not appear to be random street counterfeit work. The document imitates a legacy internal pattern that has surfaced in lender-side collateral checks tied to filings connected with Okoye Infrastructure Group. The necklace had been only the first lie. The second was hiding inside Emeka Okoye's fortune. Whispers exploded. Chike stepped toward Amara fast. "This has gone far enough," he hissed. "You're embarrassing yourself." She did not move. That was what he had never understood. He mistook quiet for fear because he had needed her to be small for his version of the world to work. Tade crossed the distance before Chike could come closer. "From this moment," he said calmly, "all communication regarding separation, assets, and allegations goes through counsel." Chike stared. "Counsel?" "Yes," Tade said. "Hers." For the first time that night, uncertainty showed on his face without disguise. Chief Emeka pushed forward, red with fury. "My family will not be insulted by a fake expert and my son's emotional wife." Kofi did not react. He began resealing the necklace and certificate separately, with the kind of care that makes liars nervous. Amara finally spoke. "The party is over." No one argued. The band did not play again. The cake remained untouched. Guests collected wraps and reputations and carried the story out in hushed voices. The birthday dinner Chike had designed as her humiliation had become something else entirely. A room full of witnesses. Amara turned toward the side lounge. Neka was already waiting there with evidence sleeves, a secured tablet, and the quiet urgency of someone who had known this exact signal might come. Kofi followed with the sealed collar. Tade came behind them. Chike tried to follow. Tade lifted one hand. Not another step. Chike's face twisted. "You can't hide behind lawyers because your feelings are hurt." Amara looked back once. "You asked for separation in front of everyone," she said. "I'm giving you the proper process." Then she entered the private lounge and closed the door. Inside, the sound changed. Ballroom whispers dulled into walls and distance. The room smelled faintly of polished wood, rain-damp coats, and dying flowers. Amara stood still for a second after the door shut, as if her body had reached safety before her heart had. Then her fingers began to tremble. Neka noticed. So did Tade. "Sit," he said gently. Amara sat not because she was weak, but because the full weight of the evening had finally reached her bones. Tade opened his folder. "What happened tonight is no longer just marital cruelty. It is evidence." Amara looked at the sealed necklace. A gift had become evidence. A birthday had become a case. A marriage had become a file. Kofi placed the certificate under secondary light. "This is not amateur work," he said. "The forger knew enough to imitate our legacy format, but not enough to survive full examination. I believe there are more." Tade turned to Neka. "Preserve everything. Ballroom footage, hotel staff logs, vendor receipts, florist records, investigator report, Chike's public statements. Any collateral queries referencing Mirembe certification. Nothing from private devices unless lawfully obtained." Neka typed immediately. Outside the door,
Voices rose in the hallway. Chike. She's being dramatic. Then Zara, lower, sharper. She looked broken. Push now. Amara closed her eyes. Even now, even after the appraisal, Chike still believed she was a woman with no real power, no leverage, no financial scale, no idea how to fight. Tade glanced toward the door. Do you want me to respond? Amara stood slowly. Kofi reopened the evidence tray just enough for her to see the false collar glittering under the lamp, still pretending to be precious. She put on gloves. Then, with steady hands, she sealed the necklace into the evidence pouch herself. Her voice was quiet, but everyone in the room heard it. He gave me a lie on my birthday, she said. Let's find out how many he inherited. The next morning, Chief Emeka Okoye struck the security desk at Mirembe Atelier headquarters hard enough to turn heads in the marble lobby. I want the person in charge, he snapped. Now. The guards did not move. That made him angrier. Mirembe Atelier's headquarters rose around him like a palace built by restraint. Pale stone, dark glass, archive sketches in recessed frames, signature pieces under museum lighting, quiet money in every corner. Chike stood beside his father looking exhausted and underslept. Zara stood a little behind them, beautifully dressed and less certain than she had been the night before. Her eyes kept moving to the cameras. At last, 2 inner doors opened. Neka stepped out. This way, please. Emeka gave her a cold smile. At least someone here understands urgency. Neka said nothing. She led them past glass partitions and private display suites toward the executive boardroom. Employees glanced up as they passed, but Chike noticed something strange. No one looked at his father with fear. They looked beyond him, toward the elevators, as if the important arrival had not happened yet. Inside the boardroom sat Tade, already prepared. Beside the display screen stood Kofi. Binta Adewale, Mirembe Atelier's general counsel, sat with the legal team. Selo Kumalo, the forensic accountant assigned to analyze suspicious collateral trails, had a laptop open. Patrick Nkube, senior representative from Emeka's primary bank, sat stiffly with a sealed file in front of him. 2 board members waited in grave silence. Chief Emeka slowed. For the first time, uncertainty entered the room before he did. Then the elevator doors opened. Amara stepped out in a white suit. Not the soft birthday gown from the ballroom, not the underestimated wife beneath chandeliers. She wore her mother's pendant, clean lines, and the calm of a woman entering a room that already belonged to her. Every employee in the hallway lowered their heads slightly. Madam Mirembe, Binta said. Chike stopped breathing for a second. Chief Emeka looked from Binta to Amara, then laughed once, too sharply. What is this? Why is she here? No one answered his tone with tone. Amara walked to the head of the table and stopped behind the chair Emeka had clearly expected some unseen titan to occupy. Binta's voice was precise. Mrs. Amara Okoye, legally Amara Mirembe in Executive Registry, is the majority owner and chief executive officer of Mirembe Atelier. Silence took the room whole. Chike's face lost color. Emeka looked around as if waiting for the punchline, the correction, the servant to laugh and say, enough of this. No one moved. No one smiled. Zara's hand slipped off Chike's sleeve. Amara looked at Emeka with the same gentleness that had once made him think she had no edges. He once told me Mirembe Atelier was for people beyond my reach. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Chike found his voice first, but it broke on the way. You lied to me. Amara turned to him. Pain moved in her eyes, but weakness did not. I told you I worked with Mirembe.
You decided I was too small to matter there. That struck deeper than he wanted it to, because somewhere inside himself, he knew it was true. Binta nodded to Kofi. Begin. The birthday necklace certificate appeared on the screen beside 3 other documents. At a glance, each looked legitimate enough to fool outsiders. Luxury valuation language, authentication seals, registered serial patterns. Kofi spoke first. All 4 of these certificates are forged. Cello turned his laptop so the financial columns faced the room. 3 of them were attached to collateral schedules, submitted in support of commercial loan facilities linked to Okoye Infrastructure Group and related entities. Patrick opened his file.
Mr. Okoye, until full verification is completed, your bank is freezing the relevant credit lines and initiating collateral review. Chief Emeka gripped the back of a chair. This is nonsense. Cello did not blink. Your listed luxury assets were inflated. The support documents used Mirembe Atelier's name. Mirembe has no record of issuing these certifications. If those papers were used to secure financing, the exposure is not cosmetic, it is material. Chike looked between the screen and his father, and the truth reached him in ugly pieces. The family image he had chosen over his wife, the status he had defended, the wealth he assumed was permanent, the future Zara had seemed to represent. It all began to look like painted gold over hollow metal. Amara did not raise her voice. Mirembe Atelier will cooperate fully with banks, insurers, and investigators, she said. Effective immediately, all trade support channels connected to Okoye Infrastructure Group are suspended pending review. Chike frowned. What trade support? Tade answered before Amara did. The support structures that kept your father's supplier network alive for the last 6 months. He turned slowly toward Amara. For the first time, he was no longer looking at the wife he believed he could discard. He was looking at the woman who had quietly been holding the floor beneath his family. Chief Emeka shook his head. You cannot do this. Amara's expression did not change. I am not doing anything to you, Chief Okoye. I am only stopping what I was doing for you. That line landed harder than anger would have. Patrick's phone buzzed. He looked down, then back up. Formal hold has now been placed on the group's commercial credit line. Chike reached for the edge of the table and missed it. Chief Emeka, who had filled rooms for years with the sound of his own certainty, looked suddenly like a man hearing the first crack inside his empire. Collapse rarely arrives as one dramatic fall. It comes in humiliations small enough to feel personal. Chike learned that within days. First, a card declined in front of people who knew his name. Then another. Then suppliers stopped picking up calls. Then investors postponed meetings, until postponed quietly became canceled. Then the family name stopped sounding powerful and started sounding risky. He discovered too late that his signature sat on personal guarantees he had never read carefully, because he had trusted the fortune he had been raised to worship. Chief Emeka had called those signatures routine, air formalities, temporary instruments. Now they felt like chains. At the same time, Mirembe's internal teams moved without noise. Binta's legal office sent notices. Kofi signed authentication statements. Cello's forensic trail widened. Tade preserved public and private evidence cleanly enough that nobody could dismiss it as emotional retaliation. That was what hurt Chike most. If Amara had screamed, he could have called her unstable. If she had insulted Zara publicly, he could have called her jealous. If she had threatened his father in rage, he could have called her vindictive. But she did none of that. She simply stopped protecting people who had mistaken her mercy for dependence. And truth did the rest. Chief Emeka blamed everyone except himself. You brought that necklace into the room, he shouted one night in the family office, while assistants quietly boxed expensive objects for emergency sale. "You let that appraiser touch it. You made this public." Chike stared at him across collapsing dignity. "You were using fake certificates long before I bought that necklace." Emeka's eyes hardened. "I kept this family alive." "No," Chike said, and the words surprised even him. "Amara did." Silence followed, because once he said it, he could see everything differently. The mysterious easing of supplier pressure, the unexplained survival of contracts, the strange mercy that had kept arriving through channels his father pretended were strategic brilliance. Amara had been standing behind those gaps all along, quiet, invisible, undeserved. And he had called her too simple for his future. That same week, Zara Bellows' world began falling apart in a different language. Not bank language, social language, brand language, image language. At first, she thought speed would save her. She deleted photos, archived posts, removed tags, changed captions, unfollowed people before they could unfollow her. But scandal moved faster than vanity. Guest phone videos from the birthday ballroom spread through private circles, then niche gossip pages, then luxury commentary threads, then mainstream culture accounts. At first, people shared the clip because a husband had gifted his wife a fake luxury necklace. Then they shared it because the wife had turned out to be the hidden billionaire owner of the very house being counterfeited. Then someone froze the frame at the exact second Zara smiled into her glass while Amara held the velvet box. That smile became an image. That image became her name. Emails arrived one after another. Partnership paused. Board invitation withdrawn. Event appearance reconsidered. Further collaborations canceled pending review. Tade's office sent a preservation notice through proper channels, naming Obsidian Crown Antiques, referencing the necklace receipt, and requiring preservation of communications related to Chike, the dealer, and any Mirembe-style items, including the bracelet she had worn that night. Zara sank onto the edge of her bed and read the letter twice. Preserve all communications. That meant they already knew enough to know where to look. Only then did memory start betraying her too. A week before the party, she had slid the dealer's card across a private lounge table and told Chike the collar would be good enough. "She won't know," Zara had said with a soft laugh. "She still wears that little old pendant like it's treasure." He had laughed too. That memory made her skin go cold now, because Amara had known the moment she touched the box. Not just that the necklace was fake, that the people behind it were false too. When Zara finally got Chike on the phone, he was already fraying. "My whole life is collapsing," he snapped. "My name is collapsing too," she shot back. "My partnerships are gone. My invitations are gone. Your father's contacts won't even reply." He laughed bitterly. "My father's contacts aren't replying to my father." "You said your family was untouchable." "You said the necklace would fool her." Silence sat between them, ugly and stripped of glamour. Their affair had once worn the costume of romance. Secret lounges, careful lies, whispered promises about a future after Amara. But now no money was shining around them. No status cushioning the fall, no fantasy left to live in. Only blame, only consequence, only the growing realization that the woman they had mocked had never been the fool in the story. Across the city, Chike stood in rain outside Mirembe Atelier headquarters and looked like a man the city had already stopped remembering. No driver waited beside him, no luxury watch gleamed at his wrist. No powerful father stood at his shoulder with advice. No Zara leaned into him as if he were still something worth displaying. Only rain, only glass,
only the building he had once ignored whenever Amara said she worked late. He had been there nearly an hour when a black company car pulled up near the entrance. A security officer stepped out with an umbrella. Then Amara emerged, wearing a dark coat, her mother's pendant, and the same quiet expression that had terrified him more than fury ever could. He rushed forward. Security moved immediately. "Amara, please," he said. 5 minutes. Tade stepped from the far side of the car. "Mrs. Mirembe is under no obligation to speak with you outside counsel." Chike looked at Amara. "Please, not through lawyers. I need to say it to you." Rain struck the umbrella steadily above her. Years earlier, he had stood in rain with an umbrella over her after the charity auction and made her feel seen. Now he stood in the rain, and she was the protected one. The mirror of it hurt more than he expected. 5 minutes, Amara said softly. Tade looked at her, then stepped back. Security allowed the distance, but not much. Up close, Chike looked smaller, exhausted, unshaven, frightened, as if all the expensive confidence had been washed off and only the man beneath it remained. "I was confused," he began. "Everything moved too fast. Zara got in my head. My father kept saying you weren't right for the future we needed. He made me think I had to choose someone who understood status." Amara said nothing. He rushed on because her silence had become unbearable. "I didn't know who you were. I didn't know you owned Mirembe. If I had known—" "That," Amara said, "is the problem." He stopped. Her voice was soft enough that he had to listen carefully, which made each word cut deeper. "You did not leave because you misunderstood me. You left because you believed I had nothing to offer you." Rain kept falling. She saw memories in flashes. Late nights spent quietly stabilizing channels tied to his father's failing business while he slept upstairs. Dinner tables where Chief Emeka mocked her pendant and Chike looked away. Hotel footage. Zara's hand on his arm. The fake collar in the black velvet box. His smile while asking for separation in front of witnesses. Each memory was short, sharp, complete. Chike shook his head. "I made a mistake." "No," Amara said. "A mistake is forgetting flowers. A mistake is saying something careless. You planned my humiliation. You brought her to my birthday. You let your father degrade me. You gave me a fake diamond collar and called it a gift. You wanted me small. That was not confusion. That was character." He looked down, because for the first time there was no argument large enough to hide inside. Tade stepped forward and opened the folder. "These are the revised separation documents and civil notices. The infidelity clause applies. The public defamation clause applies. Any attempt to use Mrs. Mirembe's name, position, or company for leverage will trigger additional action." Chike took the papers with wet hands. "So that's it?" "That," Tade said, "is the process you requested in the ballroom." Chike looked past him to Amara. "I didn't know your world was this big." A sad, almost smile passed through her face and disappeared. "My world was never the issue, Chike. Your heart was." Something in him broke then. Not theatrically, not loudly, just enough for her to see the man she had once loved, trying to stand inside the ruins of the man he had become. "I still love you," he whispered. Her eyes softened, and that softness hurt him more than anger would have. "No," she said. "You love what you lost. There is a difference." He stepped half forward. Security shifted. He stopped. "Please, we can start again. I'll leave Zara. I'll cut off my father. I'll do whatever it takes." Amara looked back at Mirembe Atelier rising behind her. Light, labor, memory, legacy.
The house built from her mother's skill, the place she had hidden for love and nearly let destroy her. "I'm not punishing you for leaving me," she said. "I'm letting you live with the cost of how you left." He lowered his head. For a moment, only rain spoke. Then he asked the question that had been waiting beneath all the others. "Did you ever really love me?" Her breath caught. She thought of fever nights, quiet rescues, swallowed insults, hope carried like a candle toward her own birthday. "Yes," she said, "enough to hide my crown, not enough to let you step on it." Then she turned and walked toward the doors. Security lifted the umbrella higher. Tade followed. The glass opened for her and closed behind her. Chike remained outside, soaked and silent, holding the papers that ended the life he once thought he controlled. Months passed. The Okoye mansion opened its gates under the eyes of strangers and cameras. Movers carried out furniture. A bank officer stood near the steps with a clipboard. The family crest had already been removed from the outer stone, leaving behind a pale mark where pride had once been bolted. Chief Emeka stood in the driveway with the stillness of a man who had finally run out of sound. For years he had filled rooms with his voice. Power, legacy, bloodline, luxury, status. Men like him always think collapse will look like a dramatic enemy. Often it looks like labeled boxes, legal signatures, and people who no longer answer the phone. Chike did not stand beside his father. They had almost nothing left to say to one another. Okoye Infrastructure Group was dismantled under review. Collateral findings widened. Insurance cooperation deepened. Emergency asset sales became quiet liquidation. The name that once opened doors now triggered caution. Chike eventually found supervised work in a logistics office willing to hire him only after confirming he was barred from financial handling. His desk sat near the back. No title on the door, no drivers, no invitation-only dinners. At lunch, he sometimes opened his phone and saw the clip again. Amara under chandeliers, the velvet box in her hand. Zara smiling. His own face performing confidence 1 second before Kofi opened the first lie. The caption attached to the clip changed, depending on who posted it, but the meaning never did. He humiliated the owner of Mirembe with a fake necklace. Every time he read it, the same weight returned to his chest. He had not left a weak wife. He had publicly betrayed the woman who had quietly protected him. He had traded real love for counterfeit status. Zara did not survive the scandal either. People no longer remembered her as elegant. They remembered the smirk. Brand deals vanished. Charity invitations stopped. Women who once kissed her cheek at events now turned away. She had wanted Amara's place without ever understanding what that place truly was. It had not been beside Chike. It had been at the center of an empire Zara could never touch. And through all of it, Amara never gave the public the cruelty they expected from a powerful woman with every reason to take revenge. She did not mock Chike, did not name Zara in public, did not parade victory. She worked. She cooperated with the law. She let documentation finish what deception had started. Then, 6 months after the birthday party, Mirembe Atelier announced a new collection, the Eleni collection. On the launch night, Mirembe headquarters looked different from the cold boardroom where Chike had learned the truth. Warm gold lighting softened the stone. Garden flowers, small, simple, the kind Eleni Mirembe once kept in cracked ceramic vases near her market stall, lined the entrance. At the center of the main gallery stood the first piece of the collection beneath glass. It was not loud. It was not oversized. It carried a graceful curve inspired by the little pendant Amara had worn through every insult, every dinner, every lie, every silence. Beside it stood Eleni's original sketch. Guests moved slowly through the room, speaking lower than usual. It did not feel like a product launch. It felt like a daughter taking her mother's dream out of survival and placing it fully into light. Amara waited behind the stage curtain with Neka and Tade nearby. "Are you ready?" Neka asked. Amara touched the pendant at her throat. For years, she had believed hiding parts of herself would protect love from greed. That if someone chose her before knowing her scale, the love would be purer. But hiding had not protected her. It had only made the wrong people comfortable. Tade stepped closer. "You don't have to prove anything tonight." Amara smiled faintly. "I know." And for the first time, she truly meant it. When she walked onto the stage, the room went still. No one saw Chief Emeka's underestimated daughter-in-law. No one saw Chike's quiet wife. No one saw the woman Zara had mocked. They saw Amara Mirembe, owner.